Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ MV Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Might be the richest person ever been in the room.
I think so. The
think so.
co-owner of the
I hope
Philadelphia
not, actually, for you guys.
76ers.
Why?
Why?
I want everyone to do great. I don't want to be the rich. I want to be like I want to be the poorest guy who keeps doing better and better.
But the streets say you a billionaire.
Like a billionaire.
Like a billionaire. Like
Well,
Big
Michael
B.
Rubin, first of all.
Yeah, Michael Rubin, yes. Not net worth billionaire, like real life liquid billionaire. Any truth to these rumors?
You know, I'll talk about just about anything, but net worth is definitely not where I'm going to start. How's that for you?
But you know I want to start because
That's not how I want to make my name. Is based
You
on
wanna
the
start
amount.
there.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
But I like-
Charlamagne's
but
what
I
we
like
call a
it.
bird. He likes to talk about
No, I like
finances
success
first.
stories. That's all.
I love
like
success
good
stories.
American success.
Yeah,
But
of course.
let's talk about that, how you started, because your story is really inspiring. So
Thank
you started out.
Could you let him tell the story? How you gonna tell?
I'm giving
You started out.
I'm giving him
Oh, you said tell the story. I like it. Go
As
ahead.
a kid, can you start off with your story as a kid? How you got into the ski shop? And
Yeah.
everything?
Well, I can tell you this. I was like a horrible athlete. I was a terrible student.
It's like Charlamagne.
Yeah. Which part, the athlete or the student?
Both.
Got it.
Both,
Okay.
both.
The only thing I was good at was business. And I was good at it from the time I was a little kid. So, like, I literally, when I was 8 years old, had like 3 different businesses. I would go like door to door. It was snowing. I would get 5 kids to work for me. And I'd literally sell the snow shoveling. I was like making stationery on the computer and selling that door to door.
I love those kids, by the way.
So
I was hustling.
Did you shovel the snow, or you had them shovel it and you were in charge?
No, I tell you, I was a terrible athlete already. No,
You don't have to be an athlete to shovel
I
snow.
wasn't
strong.
I would have had a heart attack even at that age. I
You
was
had
like,
no muscle endurance.
I didn't have enough muscle endurance. I was weak.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, I could sell those doors really quickly. And, you know, it snowed and we could do thousands of dollars in business as an 8-year-old. And I had all the kids working for me. It was very efficient.
And where were you from? Pennsylvania?
Yeah,
Oh, you from
suburban
Philly?
Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every winter you would cake up when it snowed.
By the way, by the time, so I went to a ski camp one year and I came back, and this is really how the real business started. I learned how to tune skis, and a friend of mine said, like, hey, you love business. It's really the only thing you're good at. You love skiing. Why don't you start a little ski tuning shop in your parents' basement? I did that when I was 12. And then by the time I was 14, I actually opened my first real retail ski store. It was
my
about
gosh.
10 minutes from my parents' house.
At 12?
At 14 years
14,
old. Yeah,
wow.
I started in my basement at 12. By the way, when I was 13, I did $25,000 in my parents' basement.
Damn.
No overhead.
No overhead. That's
Made 15
brilliant.
grand.
Did you pay
But
taxes?
that's a great question. I can't, hold on. Let me say this. Hold on, let me say this. On the grounds that it could incriminate me, and I don't know, I'm not going to answer that question.
All right, there you
I
go.
thought from 7 years and earlier they couldn't really.
I don't think so, but still, me, they may come after me, and I really don't know. It was, I mean, I hate to admit it, I'm 46 now, so it was like 33 years ago. But, so at 14,
You don't remember filing a W-2 that year.
well, actually, I'll tell you what. It's funny enough. There are a lot of things I don't remember, but I actually do remember filing my tax returns as like a 14 and 15-year-old because that's how I learned about accounting. But so when I was
Wow.
14, I opened my first ski shop. And being a 14-year-old owning a ski shop, you get a lot of media attention. So that helped drive the business.
Wow.
And I did like $125,000 in business and made a nice profit. And then I got a little bit cocky. And by the time I was 16, I had a bigger ski shop. And at the end of the season, it didn't snow. If you're in the ski business and it doesn't snow,
Oh, it's over.
that
Disaster.
it doesn't do very good.
Right.
So I was literally 16 years old. I had $200,000 in bills. I had $120,000 in inventory.
A brand new car.
That's the story. I've only come out of late. I actually did buy a Porsche as a 15-year-old, even though I wasn't allowed to drive it yet.
Jesus Christ, you got a lot of pussy in Pennsylvania then.
I
At
mean-
15, with a Porsche.
I need a couple drinks before we start talking about that. Hold on, I got it perfect.
When were you going to school?
So I had the ski shop. So now I'm literally like basically bankrupt. And the story goes, and it's a real story. In the spring of when I was 16 years old, I literally got sued probably 100 times. The sheriff became like a good friend of mine because every morning she'd show up at my parents' house and she'd be like, "Here are your lawsuits for the day." I'd be like, "Hey, how are you? Good morning." I'd give her a hug.
That sued a 14-year-old?
They no one knew how old I was. They said I was
my
16
goodness.
at this
Oh,
point.
16,
so,
huh?
Yeah, I'm 16 years
For
old.
what, though? What are you getting sued for?
I owed $200,000 to like 150 vendors, and each of the vendors were suing me because I didn't have the money to pay the bills. So now I think I'm going bankrupt. I think it's all over. Like I try to be in business. Now I suck as a student. I suck as an athlete. Now I suck in business too. And I hire a bankruptcy lawyer, and the bankruptcy lawyer is going through this whole conversation. He says, "By the way, how old are you?" I said, "How old do you think I am?" He's like, "I don't know, 20, 21. I said, "No, I'm actually 16. He says, "Well, that's the best news I've ever heard because you're not allowed to owe money at 16. And so I ended up getting very lucky. It's the first time I ever went to my parents to borrow money. And I went to my dad and said, hey, I can get out of this bankruptcy problem. I need to borrow $38,000, which was a ton of money.
$38,000?
$38,000, ton of money to my family.
The most my mother ever made in 1 year was $30,000 as a school teacher in South Carolina.
And by the way, I get it. $38,000 was a ton of money. And my dad's like, look, it's a ton of money, but if you agree to go to college, I'll lend you the money.
Now, but before you get to that, though, so were you giving your parents any money when you were using their basement to actually make money?
Hell no.
No, it was rent free.
Because I'd have been like, look, we need our percentage.
Don't pay your parents.
Yeah, no, they were a good landlord, by the way. They were a good landlord. They said, so long as you do okay in school, we're going to let you do this.
Right.
But so now I'm 30. I need this $38,000 to settle all these debts. And my dad says, I'll lend you the money so long as you agree to go to college.
They forced you to go to college to get more debt.
Right. So now it gets really interesting. 2 weeks later, I find another ski shop that went bankrupt. $200,000 of inventory that got sold for $13,000 at an auction. So what do you think I did?
You bought the ski shop.
There was only one problem. I didn't have the money to pay for it. So I bought the ski shop I bought all the inventory for $13,000. I said, Dad, great idea. I just bought this $200,000 of inventory for $13,000. He looks at me and says, there is no chance I'm giving you another penny. You got yourself into this mess. Go figure it out. So
At 16?
At 16.
Wow.
So I started going to all my neighbors. And I found a neighbor who said, I'll lend you the $13,000 because you're going to make a lot of money from this.
What area is this where a neighbor just let you
shut up and tell the story.
This is great.
Suburbs of Philadelphia.
This is great.
He says, I want $1,000 a week interest.
Holy
Ooh,
cow.
That's a lot.
I thought it was a great deal.
You thought that was a great deal.
That's terrible.
I borrowed the money. And literally in 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I sold maybe a quarter of the inventory and paid back all of the money plus the $3,000 interest.
Wow.
And what that giant failure did was it taught me into a brand new business. By the time I was 21 years old, I was the largest wholesaler of closeout footwear in the world, doing $100 million, making $10 million a year.
Damn.
And I tell you this story because I saw death in its eyes as a 16-year-old, thought I was going bankrupt, and then that got me into the closeout business, and I became the biggest closeout seller of footwear in the world. So for me, I tell you this only because I failed so many times, but every time I fail, it kind of leads to the next success.
Well, a lot of holes in this story. Let's back up a little bit. Okay.
Fire away.
Number one, how did you get into skiing? And number two, how did you get the money to originally just even start this business?
Sure. So I said I wasn't a good athlete. The only sport I was somewhat good at was skiing, and I was always pretty good at skiing. And so I started skiing as a kid, 3-4 years old with my parents. It was like the thing we did over the holidays together. And so I grew up a skier. And actually, when I started the business, I started it with no money because what happened was when I started the ski tuning shop in my parents' basement when I was 12.
And what's that? What is ski tuning exactly? I don't.
It's like when you ski, you ski over
Tune
like
up
a
somebody's
rock.
skis.
You fix them up.
Calibrating the skis.
Gotcha.
It's like
Gotcha.
washing a car.
So
It's
you
like
needed
different.
no
Gotcha.
money for this business, and it was all profit.
It cost $100 to start the business. So I did like $2,500 when I was 12 years old. But the following year, there was a ski swap where all the ski retailers brought their old inventory. And at the end of the swap, I met a couple different retailers. I said, hey, I have this little ski tuning shop in my parents' basement. If you want to lend me the inventory, and then I'll pay you for it as I sell it, so they give it to me on consignment, I would love to do that with you. And I had this full ski shop in my parents' basement. I actually put a video on Instagram a couple months ago. I was like literally 13-year-old. I had a full ski shop in my parents' basement. I had no overhead. I paid for the stuff as I sold it. And that's why I did $25,000 and made $15,000. So when I went to open the ski shop at 14, all I needed to do was get my dad to co-sign the lease, and I had enough money to and I had worked with vendors that I got open credit, which is how I ended up $200,000 in debt as a 16-year-old.
You're lucky your dad, because he co-signed, didn't end up having to owe that money. Because I thought
I always paid all my rent. I was always
Okay,
able
so
to
that
cover
was
it.
just the lease. And
Yeah,
then-
it was the inventory I couldn't pay for.
Okay.
Were you born into money?
I grew up in a very middle class family. I mean, the house that my parents bought that they lived in my entire life was a $42,000 house. So it's not, very middle class family.
Now
Really
tell us-
hardworking parents. But look, obviously where I am now, you're around people that are incredibly successful. My parents both really hardworking people, but we did not come from money in any way, shape, or form.
The person who gave you the $13,000.
Yeah.
Are you still close with this individual today?
No.
Not at all.
No, I don't even.
$1,000 a week interest. I mean,
I don't even think he's alive, to be honest. I mean, think about. He'd be in his 70s or 80s now.
he should have said, "Let's be partners on it, and I'll invest the money."
I agree. He would have done better.
He would have done much
Which is
better.
why I thought that $1,000 a week interest was a good deal.
Right.
I wonder why he trusted you to loan you this money.
I was like, people knew I had the ski tuning shop. Everyone knew it's like Michael Rubin, this business kid. I think people saw.
It was all over the news. It was on the paper.
And people
it was everywhere.
saw potential in me. And
Yeah.
by the way, It was a great deal. It was $200,000 of inventory for $13,000.
Right.
Someone came to you and said, "Hey, you can buy those shoes that normally cost $75 wholesale. You can buy them for $10 a pair. Would you go get all the money you can to buy?"
Absolutely.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
Right. And then you
Same
were going to
thing.
hustle.
Now tell us about this GSI Commerce. What company was that? Because you started that company. Tell us about that and how you did that.
Yeah, so basically what happened is after I nearly went bankrupt and I built this pretty big business buying and selling excess footwear, that led me to I then had a couple footwear brands in my early 20s. And we were like never a great company. It was like a $200 million company. We owned a couple footwear companies. We bought and sold closeouts. And then the internet thing came in 1998. I knew nothing about it because I was like in business pre the internet. So I was, kind of, didn't really understand. I wasn't like a young kid who grew up with the internet. It was I was kind of ahead of it a little bit. And we were a public company. We had about a $200 million value of the company. And there was one person who was an analyst who actually followed our company. He called me and said, "Hey, Michael, what are you doing about this internet thing?" I'm like, screw the internet. Who cares about the internet? It's all these young kids. All they do is lose money. Don't waste my time with this internet thing. And I hung up on the guy. And he calls me back. He's like, "Michael, you should really think about this internet thing." So I did what any entrepreneur would do. I started calling the big accounts from my existing business. So I called Mitchell Modell's, and I called the Sports Authority, and I called Dick's Sporting Goods, and I called all the big sporting goods retailers. And I said, "What are you guys doing about this internet thing?" And everyone said the same thing to me. They said, "We think it's a really good opportunity, but we have no idea how to approach it. Like, you're young. If you have some internet solution, bring it to me."
That's a great idea.
And
remember,
and
they
this
thought in 2000, they thought the whole internet was going to be gone. Remember that whole Y2K?
2001. Well, yeah, that as well. But so this was 99. And so I basically, having no experience, no real capital for something of this magnitude, I basically started GSI Commerce, and I went and I got the 5 biggest sporting goods retailers to give me all of their e-commerce rights over long-term deals. And that's how we started GSI Commerce, which then over time we started to work with lots of other retailers. So it became the biggest kind of infrastructure for big retailers to run and big brands to run their e-commerce business. So if you went to Ralph Lauren, or you went to Burberry, you went to Kate Spade, or you went to Dick's Sporting Goods, or Toys R Us, or GNC, we ran major aspects of their e-commerce business. And it became a pretty big company. I sold it in 2011 to eBay. It was a public company. They bought it for $2.4 billion. And
So that's how you made your first initial huge money, I guess?
Absolutely.
How
After you
old
sold
you
it, after you sold it, all those companies went down. Sports Authority's out of here. Modell's had hard times. Toys R Us is gone.
I'll tell you what, it was pretty obvious to me where the world was going, and I was not a big believer in the long-term overall health of retail. So when I had a business that was dependent on retailers, for me, it was a great evolution to kind of, I kind of, had the best of all situations because I sold my company to eBay. And then there were 3 businesses that they weren't interested in.
Now, you were the sole owner of your company.
No, it was a public company.
Okay.
I was the largest shareholder of the
Gotcha.
company. And so they bought the company in 2011. I was, I guess I was 38 or 39 at that point. I'm still having trouble acknowledging them in my 40s.
I got you.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Yeah,
You-
it's not. I'm officially like a dinosaur.
I'm 40. I like it.
You're old.
Yeah.
You're old.
But
You're old.
Age is a blessing. I think about all the people I know that died young. Like, they didn't get to live their life. Like, if you didn't live to be 38, you wouldn't have made that money.
I agree, but I end up in these conversations with Meek all the time about friends of his that have died, and fortunately for me, I don't have a lot of friends that have I haven't been through that with my friends, but I actually feel like I'm getting younger every year because I'm doing so many fun and great things. But I still make fun of myself for being old all the time.
Human beings are the only, we put value on everything that has age except for ourselves. Antique cars, wine, cognac, cheese. But when it comes to ourselves, we act like we're depreciating with value the older we get.
No, we're definitely appreciating for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, when you was 21, you said you was making $10 million a year?
The year I was 21, I did $100 million in business and made a $10 million profit, literally.
How did you not lose your fucking mind?
You know what? For me, I always loved the hustle of what I did, and I never even thought about, and I still don't today, even and we have 3 pretty big companies today. Like, for me, I'm always focused on what's next, where are we going, how can I keep building? Like, to me, money's not, if you're successful enough, it's more of a report card for how you're doing than something that I think of any differently. So I always just wanted to grow because I was always like a fast-moving entrepreneur.
So you never got caught up in the lifestyle, like on Wolf of Wall Street when he's sniffing coke off girls' asses.
No,
and, like,
definitely not.
That wasn't your thing. You
No,
wasn't a party guy?
it was not my thing. I've always had fun. I've had fun since I've been a kid. I've always I have fun, but I've always had boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? Like you could, do I go out with my boys? Have I always had fun? I've always been that way. Absolutely. But I have boundaries, and I know not to cross those boundaries.
And you have to have a different level of discipline to get to be who you are.
Listen, to me, the biggest thing that's made me successful, and for whatever success I've had so far, has been like just a complete determination and an unwilling, like I will not quit under any circumstances. I believe anything I set my mind to is possible, and a lot of people don't. So I'm not like, I barely made it out of high school. I mean, people don't get this about me. You were asking about high school before. I got out of high school to work at my ski shop in both my 11th and 12th grade of high school. I was out at 11 o'clock. And I barely graduated high school. I went to college for 8 weeks. I got on my SATs, and this you guys won't believe me. I'm telling you, I got a 780 combined on my SATs.
I think I got that in one section.
Right. And by the way, a lot of people have. And so, like, to me, I wasn't book smart.
Right.
I wasn't school smart at all.
Fine.
But what I had was common sense and street smarts,
Right.
and just a determination to say, like, I can succeed at whatever I want to
A
put
lot
my
of
mind
people
to.
talk
Absolutely.
themselves out of things. Like they might have a great idea and they're like, oh, well, this can't work. Well, I don't know how that's going to happen. But you're right. Like a lot of
I
us-
agree with you, by the way. It's the biggest problem. People always say, hey, I've got this idea, but. You know, like from my perspective, go for it. If you fail, go for it
But
again.
that's why I love your story, because you came from nothing and you did it yourself. You worked hard to do it. Yeah, you did get a loan, but you still worked hard to get what you had to get. A lot of people say, oh, I can't do it because that person had this or that person had this opportunity. You didn't have that opportunity. You took something in your parents' basement and made it work.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And
I'd love to hear that.
I agree with that. Like I have a lot of friends who've come from a lot. Like I said, we came from a middle-class family. Yes, it was great. I got a $38,000 loan. The truth be told, if I didn't, I would have gone bankrupt, borrowed the $13,000. I would have just bought myself back. You know what I'm saying? I would have bought what they auctioned off for my own company back.
And how did you do now let's talk about the 76ers. How did you become co-owner of the 76ers? How did you do that after you sold GSI?
Yeah, so we sold GSI to eBay in spring of 2011, and Josh Harris and Dave Blitzer put a deal together to buy the team at the same period of time. Coincidentally, the owner of the Sixers, Ed Snyder, was a terrific individual who started the Flyers and was responsible for the Sixers. He was my next door neighbor. So he sold the team to Josh Harris and David Blitzer, and they were looking for strategic partners that could, really kind of add some value to the business.
Bring the 76ers back.
Yeah, and they were looking for just, kind of smart, value-added owners. And for me, my primary business then and today is still Fanatics, which is the largest retailer in the world of licensed sports merchandise. So I've been in business with the NBA from 2000, really from 99 for my old company. So I knew David Stern and Adam Silver really well. And the real story was I called David Stern. I said, hey, I met Josh Harris and David Blitzer. I'm thinking about, kind of doing this with them. We're having this conversation. What do you think? And David said to me, hey, you know what, Michael, you do whatever's best for you. If you want to do it, you do it. If you don't, don't. And then my phone rings, and about 5 minutes later, he says, I thought more about this. You're the only one I know. If there's ever an issue, I know to call you, so I want you involved with this.
I want you to do it.
And that's how I got involved with the Sixers. It was a combination of Josh and David putting the deal together, and David Stern told me he thought it was a good idea for me to do it.
You've become the face of the franchise in a lot of ways.
Well, I think the players are the face of the franchise. I think Joel and Ben and Jimmy are the face of the franchise.
They are, but when I think of, when you think of the Mavericks, you think of Mark Cuban. You know what I'm saying? When you think of the Hornets, you think of Jordan. Now, when you think of Sixers, you think of Mike Rubin.
Yeah. Look, I think...
Does that bring a lot of attention amongst the owners?
No, I think we have a phenomenal ownership group, and it's led by Josh Harris and David Blitzer. I'm the third largest owner of the team. Everyone in the group really gets along great. And I got to tell you, each person knows how to kind of add value in what they're good at. Like I actually have a very low basketball IQ. Like if you ask me how to help make a good basketball decision, I'd say it's not something I could add value to. At the same time, when it comes to like relationships, which is, probably a core skill set of mine, I can help add value in that. So I think there's places where I can add a lot of value, and there's places where I stay completely out of the way. But the ownership group gets together great. It's been, by the way, it's been exciting. We bought the team in 2011, for $265 million. There's been, tremendous, progress with the team. There's been, financial upside. There's been, joy in, I think, where we're headed. But the truth be told, we're really here to do one thing, which is win championships and to make all of you guys miserable, because we got Knicks and Nets fans here.
I'm not a Knicks fan.
Who are you? Sixers. Let's go. Come on.
I don't really have a team.
We're converting.
I like players.
How do you feel about Ben Simmons?
I like Ben Simmons.
busy.
I like
He's
Ben. I like Joel. I like Jimmy Butler. Yeah.
JJ? from Brooklyn.
Yeah, I like. I
Okay,
mean,
let's
I
go.
like y'all squad.
We're gonna
but
get.
I'm not
I'm getting you. I'm gonna
fan.
get you proper Sixers hoodie. We're gonna get
I'll
you
rock it.
properly dressed. Let's go.
I grew up in all Iverson gear. You talk about East Bay. I used to buy so much Allen Iverson shit from East Bay. All the sneakers, the jerseys, everything.
And listen, as he's my guy, and I gotta tell you something. The only difference now, if you bought it, you'd be buying it from our company because it was East Bay in the early days, and now it's the NBA store, which is us.
Got you.
So it's in the family.
Wow, so you own the NBA store too?
Yeah, it's including the one in New York City and the NBA store online. It's both ours.
Holy shit.
Goodness
You can't
gracious,
get away
Nick.
from me.
No, I see.
Goodness
now,
gracious.
how much has your relationship with Meek Mill changed the way you view systemic racism in America?
Well, how did you meet Meek Mill, first of all? How did you and Meek Mill establish this relationship?
Yeah, so it was just a fluke of a fluke. So we were at the All-Star game maybe 5 years ago, and my daughter at that point was a fan of Nicki, and he and Nicki were sitting next to us.
Who's Nicki?
Nicki
Nicki
Minaj.
Minaj.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
I feel the same way, by the way.
my fault.
So my daughter was just talking to Nikki, and Meek's like, in his way, he's like, "Who are you?" I'm like, or Rubin's like, "Oh, you're the
He thought you was pressing up
guy,
on Nikki?
the Sixers guy." No. And I'm like, who are you? And he said, and then within a second, what I loved about Meek from the moment I met him, he just started peppering me with business questions, like, "Hey, if I want to do this, how would you do that? And if I want to just do this in sports, and if I want to put this deal together." And in a lot of ways, he was a similar version of me from a completely different environment. And so, we weren't that friendly up front. We met there. The Sixers, we were going through a complete, we were not a very good team at that point. And so he started coming to a lot of our games after we became friendly, not boys, friendly. And he would come in with Nikki, and he'd come to our games. And
Which was good for the Sixers to have them sitting there courtside.
to be clear, Meek was the most exciting thing happening at the team. When
that
we
time,
were,
that's
we
a
were
big
10 and
deal.
72. So it was fun to have him in, and he loved it. He loves basketball, and he loved the Sixers, and he was boys with a lot of people who played on the team before. So we just, we became friendly. And one night, maybe we'd hung out at the games maybe 10 times, and we were at halftime. And I'll remember this for the rest of my life. I said, "Hey, I'm going with some friends to the Borgata afterwards. You want to come?" He said, "I'm not allowed." I'm like, "Do you need permission from your mom?" It's literally what I
That's
said
what
to
you
him. Yeah, I said, "You need
Goodness
permission."
gracious.
I said, "You need permission from your mom." I was joking. I was being a wise ass.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm
Probably
like,
like-
yeah. He's like, "No, I'm on probation." I'm like, "How's this probation thing work?" He's like, "I'm not allowed to leave. I mean, you can't go across the bridge 10 minutes." He's like, "I'm not allowed. I'll get arrested." I'm like, "What'd you do again?" From this is, going back 5 years ago. He's like, "I was charged for pointing a gun." He says, "And I know you're from and we knew each other well enough to we were fucking around with each other, but we weren't boys yet." But he's like, "Michael."
There's two Americas.
He's like, "No,
That's not yet?
not yet." He's like, "If a black person points a gun at multiple cops, they're dead. Period. End of story." And he told me that and he told me that the first time I met him on the court, but I didn't really, think about it. And he told me again. And so, we let's say we were becoming more and more friendly. By the time November 6th of 2017 happened, he'd become one of my 5-10 closest friends. I mean, he'd been on 50 trips with me, been to, 50 games. I mean, we've been all over the place together. I mean, it's like, he was, integrated in my friend group. He knew all of my friends, knew a lot of my business people, and everyone liked him. And it was like, I loved him. He loved me. He loved my friends. Really, we become really close. So when going back to 2017, first he had these two really minor incidents, the pop and the wheelie and the breaking up the fight in the airport. And so I started getting really annoyed by he was around too much. And so I'd always say to him, I'd make fun of him, like, "Bro, why are you at my house today? Like, go get a job. Like, what are you doing?"
Right.
And he'd be like, "Michael, I'm not allowed to leave Philadelphia." I'm like, "What do you mean you're not allowed to leave Philadelphia? Like, your job is to perform. You have to go."
Were you questioning if he was a real rapper at this point? Are you really
I wasn't questioning whether he's a real rapper, but what I was questioning is like, okay, this guy, I've met his mom a few times, I've met his kids several times, like he's got all these people who count him.
You're like, he's not a danger to anybody.
Right.
I can see the personality that he has. Why can't he leave and go do his job?
Right, and it was starting to bother me. So finally, I'm like, okay, now he's become one of my good friends. Like, I'm getting involved. Like, and I hate taking other people's problems on because like you have enough problems in your own life. You don't want somebody else's problems. And so I started to make my own phone calls, and they try to.
Who'd you call? Who's the first person you called?
I'm not gonna say who I called.
Okay.
But I started calling people of importance to find out, is everything he's telling me true? Like, I was hearing all I was hearing was everyone loves him, but he's got this crazy judge. But you know what? I want to make sure I'm always on guard.
Gotcha.
If you're in my situation, you're always on
I feel you.
Right.
And so the first thing I kept getting back, he's done everything he's been asked from a probation perspective. He's well liked. He's a good guy. Yeah, he's a little bit on rap time sometimes, but this is a good guy. He's doing lots of charitable things. I couldn't hear anything bad about him. And so now the judge sets a probation hearing. And I decided, I said, Meek, do you want me to write a letter for you? He's like, I don't want to put you out, but, look, if you don't mind, go ahead and do it. So I wrote this letter, which I never thought it would become public. It became very public. I wrote this letter and basically talked about my relationship with him. I basically said, like, look, this has become one of my closest friends. Like, he knows my daughter well. He knows my mom. He knows, all of my, partners in the Sixers. He's been to, he's met most of the commissioners. He's met many owners for me. Everyone likes this guy. And, I can't, obviously I know he's not perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. But I can tell you, this is a guy that belongs helping to bring people together and to make the country a better place, not, being caught up with the law.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, like, and by the way, I was, without trying to be arrogant, I was like, hey, let me give you a little background on myself. And,
Right.
I told him about my ownership in the Sixers, and, I just bought Majestic, the baseball uniform company. We saved 1,000 jobs in Pennsylvania.
Did you put your net worth in the letter?
I did not, because
Okay.
that's not my style.
Got you.
But what I did let them know is that I was the founder of GSI Commerce. I created tens of thousands of jobs in Pennsylvania, that, I was involved with the Sixers, just enough to give me credibility
Right.
without being
You're not
arrogant.
going to put yourself
Yeah.
out there for just anybody,
Yeah.
clearly.
And I've never done
Telling
before.
the truth is not arrogant.
Yeah, but I'm not, what, to me, your results ultimately, prove out what you do. Like,
Gotcha.
And that's just the way I'm built.
Right.
So I thought the judge would reach out to me, and I heard nothing. So that Monday morning, I was on my way to the office. I called him like, yeah, don't worry about it. You're going to be good. He's like, Michael, I'm really nervous about this. I'm like, do you want me to come? He's like, you know what? I don't want to put you out again. Like, but if you have the
But
time.
yes, please.
If you have time,
Please
come.
come.
I don't want to put you out there, but
So I went down, and I remember this was probably the moment I'll remember most of my entire, nothing more than this moment. So I go to the court, and I think it's going to be like a 15-minute probation hearing. So at first you go in there, and I've never been to a court like this before. You have to put your phone like in a case, so you take a phone away from a guy like me. I'm starting to go through serious withdrawal.
trust me, we know how it works.
Yeah, it wasn't a good feeling. So I go in the courtroom, and now it's supposed to, I think, start at either 1 or 2 o'clock. And like 45 minutes later, the judge isn't there. So now I'm like, okay, what is going on? Like, hold on. We had a time. She's not here. What's going on? She comes in, and there's not a lot of people in the courtroom. There's maybe a few reporters, myself, Desiree from Rock Nation, Meek, a couple of lawyers. And I watched the probation officer get up. And the probation officer gets up and says, like, we've watched Robert Williams develop. He's done everything we asked. We think he's a model probationer. That was the word they used, model probationer. We recommend no sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Then the DA gets up. District attorney from Philadelphia, recommend no sentence.
Yeah.
And now we're like 3 hours into this thing, and the judge is literally berating the probation officer. She's screaming at the probation officer.
Why?
That's what, and I'm seeing this all firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you don't know what you're talking about. I've been involved with this case for 10 years. You've only been involved for a short period of time. You don't know what I've been through. I'm like, all I want to do is take my phone out and record it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're 3 hours into this thing. They take an intermission for the 15-minute probation hearing, and we walk to the bathroom. And I said, I said to the lawyers right before, I'm like, I'm assuming everything's fine. Like,
Everybody said he should be
probation
good.
officer and DA
Right.
both recommended no
The
sentence.
DA said no sentence.
The lawyer
Right.
literally said, here's the good
Yeah.
news. In the history of anything they knew, they've never heard of someone where the judge goes against the probation officer and the DA.
right.
They were aligned. So we go to the bathroom like, yo, bro, there's no problem. Like, you're completely good. Like, there's nothing to
We're
worry
going to go
about.
to dinner after this. And
I think I did say something like, here's what we're doing afterwards,
Yeah.
something like that. And I walk back in, there's like 5 cops walking in, or 5 court people. I'm like, why are these people here? Like,
Oh, that's not good.
it's like, and I'm not street smart like for something like that, but it just seemed off. So she sits down. First thing she says, I'm sentencing you. So they said, Michael, can you get up and speak? So I got up and I spoke. I had no idea what I was going to say. I just spoke for like 15 minutes, just again talking about my relationship with him, how well I know him, how much I think he can help our country, how he's bringing people together.
Probably pissed off more.
She wouldn't even look at me.
Yeah, it's like,
I'm looking at
Really?
her. She won't look at me, and I'm like, part of me is like, you guys cursing this?
Go
thing?
ahead.
I'm like,
I
part
said pussy earlier. Man.
Okay, perfect. Okay, you're right. So a part of me was like, I'm like going in my mind. I'm like, is she fucking kidding me? Like, I'm like ready to say like, hello,
Right.
like, look at me, I'm talking to
Why?
you.
Like,
Yeah, and I'm
did
like,
you get my letter?
Yeah, I'm like, and I'm like, but look, I realize it's her courtroom, and so
You don't want to make it worse.
that's what I was worried about. I was worried about I lose my temper, which I generally never do, and I make it worse for him.
Right.
So I sit down, and she comes back, and she comes back, and she says 2 to 4 years in state prison.
Woo.
And I look at Meek, and he always wants to be Mr. Tough Guy. His eyes turn pink. There's tears coming out of his eyes. I can't remember the last time anything made me tear up. I have tears coming out of my eyes, and I looked at him. I'm like, I will not stop until you're out of prison, and she's off the bench.
Wow.
And by the way, and Jay-Z basically called into this exactly the same thing. Like, we're doing this together. Like, I will not stop until he's out of prison.
And it makes you realize how many young
Wow.
black men and women that something like this could potentially happen to and has happened to.
It didn't make me realize that yet, to be honest.
No, but now it's just his head.
What
Now
was
it's
your,
just his
what was
friend.
your what was your initial thought when that happened?
My initial thought was that this was a completely crazy judge who is obsessed with Meek, who literally, like, I thought if I went to her house, she'd have like posters in the basement, like she'd have like 100 pictures of him in the basement, and she's literally like, I mean, this is a woman. She acknowledged it during the court proceeding that she was spying on him at a probation. She literally went to when he was doing probation, and she called him out because he was apparently handing out clothes they asked him to hand out versus handing out food, and she was trying to violate him for that. She, like, no judge
Crazy.
spies on someone at
That's
probation.
crazy.
It never happens. So my initial reaction was only about her. And by the way, everything I said about her was 100% right. I mean, she was. I've never, like, she is not. I mean, this is the exception, not the norm, as it relates to judges with this
Right.
kind of behavior.
Right.
So I originally thought the problem was all about her. So I left and said, like, okay, like I didn't care about anything more than that right then. I'll tell you, I went home, and my daughter comes home at like maybe 8 o'clock in the night, 7 o'clock in the night, and she looked at me and we were like, she's, I'm always happy, and she's like, Dad, what's up? I'm like, hey, how are you? She's like, Dad, what's the matter? I'm like, oh, I'm good. She's like, Dad, what happened to me? Because she knew he had the hearing. I said, hey, it's all good. She goes, Dad, like, I'm 11. Like, I'm not an idiot. I'm just going to go to Google. Like, what happened? And literally I told her what happened. And that night at like 2 o'clock in the morning, she never comes in my room anymore. Never came in my room. She comes in my room. She's like, Dad, I just had a really bad nightmare. I'm like, what's the matter? She's like, I dreamed that if I got bad grades, I would go to prison or jail.
Wow.
And I just said to her, I said, well, you could for that, but she basically said, like, she said to me, I was there already, but she's like, you have to do everything you can. Like, in her mind, she's like, my dad's this. Like, you have to do whatever you can.
You got to get Meek out.
You got to get Meek out. That's basically what she said. I was there within
what you saw.
1 second of it happening, but it was like, it affected me so, you can't even put words on it, because to see someone's freedom be taken away who's one of your closest friends is so, like, I didn't think shit like
Who
that happened.
hasn't done
before.
anything?
Right.
So
So I didn't think that stuff happens. So my original thing was we started saying, okay, let's look at this judge. So I said right away, there's something the matter with this judge.
This judge is wrong.
This judge is wrong. So we started making a lot of donations to people that were hiring investigators. And those investigators looked at all of her cases, and nothing looked abnormal. Then we said, you should go look at her. And now everything I thought was true. We found out that the judge had over 30 individual lawsuits that she had sued people individually, just people like us. She'd sued 30 people. She's one of the most litigious judges in the history of Philadelphia. Okay? So now we said, okay, let's go find out what she's suing people for. We kept finding out crazy situation after crazy situation. People that she was saying, I'm a judge, you can't do this, or get out of the apartment that I own, or I'm going to, I'll have you evicted because I'm a judge. She was, we actually found a police officer, current police officer, who was doing construction for her. And I'm surprised the story hasn't come out more. She was doing, this police officer was doing construction on the side for the judge. She kept changing what she wanted. And ultimately the police officer said, I'm no longer going to, like, you keep changing what you want, I'm not doing it anymore. So she fires the cop from doing the work. She then reports him for breaking into her house and stealing his tools. She then tells someone in her house that she hid the tools off site. She then was so dumb, she sent an email to the person in writing saying, when you testify, here's what I want you to say.
Wow.
And then we got the computer and got all the information.
So why is she still on the stand?
Yeah, why is she still
Because the criminal justice system is broken, and she shouldn't be. And by the way, I don't believe she will be in a year from now. It's just she's got away with the behavior she's got away with, any of us, including me, would be in prison or jail.
Did she try to sue you?
I wish she would, because if she did, we could take discovery from her. And that she's threatened to sue me multiple times, but she doesn't have the courage to, because she knows the second she sues me that she's going to have 100 lawyers getting discovery from her.
Is she still
Because
presiding
Michael
over
Money
Meek's
long.
case?
That's
Yeah,
a big bet, take little bet.
but I would love her to sue me. That would give me great honor. I'd be excited about
Is
that.
she still presiding over Meek's case?
So now what's so I'll fast forward and come back to it in a second. So now so we found all these horrible things about her. And I want to tell you, like, someone who she sued. By the way, I did tell you the greatest story of all. Hershey Park. She goes to a legal convention at Hershey Park, and in the middle of the night, she wakes up, and apparently there's someone's name tag had fallen in the bed. It happened hundreds of times, according to Hershey Park. She said that she had severe trauma from the name tag that was in the bed, and that she sued Hershey Park because she's had PTSD from
PTSD.
whatever. Yeah, I can't get my acronyms right. It's my dyslexic.
Little dyslexic, that's
yeah,
all.
no problem.
It happens.
And literally, Hershey Park had never been sued. It had happened hundreds of times, but she said basically, I'm a judge, and so if you don't pay me, then I'm going to sue you. And they ended up settling with her. And by the way,
What?
And by the way, just last year, she got in a car accident. She got in a car accident in St. Martin, and in her most recent lawsuit, which she filed after all this stuff happened with Meek, which if I were her, I'd be like, I'm not filing a lawsuit when I know there's a bunch of people coming after me.
Everybody's watching you.
Right. And she said literally she couldn't do her job. So it's like, decide, like, you've either had so much damage from this car accident that you can't do your job and she should have been off the case, or you haven't had the damage and you can do your job. But you can't have had tremendous mental damage and also you can do your job at the same time. You guys should get the lawsuit. It's an amazing read.
We'll look it up. Yeah, absolutely.
Look it up for the last year. So originally, I was so totally focused on her improper behavior, because seeing that firsthand was so offensive. Meek kept saying to me, I go to prison every week and I'd see him. I bring people there to help bring visibility to the case. He'd say, Michael, I know what you saw is bothering you so much, it's driving you crazy, but I didn't point the gun. I'm telling you, I didn't point the gun. He said to me one day, he's like, get the original gun. He's like, I promise you, like, you can prove I didn't point the gun. So I left there and I called him, like, we gotta go back and interview all the original cops. The first cop that got interviewed said, oh yeah, I was one of the 2 arresting officers. He never pointed the gun. He was just trying to get rid of it and run away. I'm like, and the investigator calls me, like, what'd you just say? He's like, yeah, he never pointed the gun. I'm like, can we get an affidavit? They're like, yeah, we're drawing an affidavit up right now. I'm like, you're telling me one of the 2 police officers, who was the original, arresting officer, is signing an affidavit. And then then we find out, wait a second, the whole unit was dirty. Most of the guys have been fired, gotten to,
I've read
Had
that.
multiple cases.
Yeah.
where
yeah,
they-
the arresting officer, this guy Reggie Graham, was so dirty. He was listed as a cop too dirty to testify.
And that was like a secret document that it wasn't.
The secret
even-
document. They didn't tell us the entire time Meek was going through all these issues. And so, at that point, and this is when the light bulb went off for me. At that point, it's now Super Bowl. It's 1 year ago today. I'm at the Super Bowl. We've got this affidavit from this cop who said he didn't point the gun. I call Meek. I'm like, yo, bro, I got the best news for you. You're going to be out of prison like in the next day or 2. And I tell him, he's like, he's excited. But like, I told him, I was like, he went in November 6th. I told him you'd be home Thanksgiving. Then I told him you'd be home Christmas.
Yeah.
Then I told him he'd be at Super Bowl with us.
Right.
Then you'd be at All-Star game. So I kept being wrong.
So he tired of hearing this
Yeah,
shit.
he tired of hearing you.
He
Like,
just
all right,
want to get
bro.
his hopes up.
All right,
Look,
Michael.
Just tell me who won the game, Michael.
The Eagles won the game.
I know. I'm talking about Meek on the phone.
Yeah. But everyone knows my close relationship with Robert Kraft, so I thought you were starting to poke at me for that.
Okay.
So now it takes us another 3 months to get him out. And so at that point, I'm like, we're having these conversations every day. I'm like, this criminal justice system is so fucked up. Like, how is it so broken?
Think about if you have no money,
Right.
you have no connections.
We spent $6 million between Jay-Z and I.
Sheesh.
Okay? You're talking about like, I mean, 99.99999% of people in this situation have nothing.
Right.
They can't afford anything.
can't
even
afford to
find
pay.
out.
So Meek had myself, Jay-Z, and everyone we brought into this fighting like the most difficult fight of our lives. And by the way, I was working on this more than anything else I was doing from the day it happened because I was so fundamentally pissed off by it. And it took us 6 months to get an innocent person out of prison for something he didn't do.
And $6 million.
And now we're saying, okay, now I'm saying to Meek, if that's what's happened to you, oh my God, the system is fun. And then you start hearing all these stories. And that's when Meek and I kind of said to each other, like, look, as soon as you get out of prison, like, we got to do something about this because this is just wrong. And going back to the question you asked about
how has it changed the way you view systemic racism in America?
completely, I was oblivious.
Yeah.
I had no clue.
Right.
And it wasn't because I didn't care. Like I have so many, like I've got the most diverse group of friends of anyone on the planet, but it's just like I just didn't see it. I was in my own world.
Until it affects somebody really close to you, you probably don't have any idea.
That's
like
why-
you didn't
Yeah,
even realize he couldn't travel out of state.
It didn't. None of it made sense, but it didn't hit me until being in that courtroom that day.
So how did you
I'll tell you what.
finally
I'm
get
gonna tell you.
him out
One,
too
I'm gonna
after?
tell you one thing. That judge, well, I think she is not fit. She's not. I won't say. I think she's not fit to be a judge, and she doesn't belong on the bench, and it's a disservice to our state and our country. I can tell you that she did me and the country a big favor because she opened my eyes to a situation that I never believed existed, and had it not been for her horrific judging,
Right.
whatever we call it, whatever she does as a judge,
Non-judging.
yeah, non-judging, then probably she would have put me in prison, and we wouldn't have started reform and worked to get a million people out of the system. So I think so much good has come from this, but it's been so painful going through it.
You know
did you
why
get
you're
him out? Hold
rare?
on.
You know why you're rare, though?
Well, hold on one second.
Hold on.
How did you get him out though? Because you never told how he finally got out.
$6 million.
Well,
No.
it was a combination.
saying,
Well, it was a combination of we had investigators that proved everything. I mean, it was proven that she was a bad and dirty judge. It was proven that he didn't do what he was originally charged of. Then, because we're doing all this work, the Philadelphia Inquirer, give them credit, they discovered that the original arresting officer was on a list that was too dirty to testify. So now you have one affidavit saying he didn't commit the crime from the other arresting officer, and now Meek's arresting officer is on a list that's been on for like 10 years that's too dirty to testify. He should have been out the same day. And here's the craziest thing of all.
His charges should have
Hold
been
on.
dropped.
Here's the craziest thing of all. He's still on probation. It's still not over.
Right.
This guy's got 5 years left of probation. That's the thing that literally it makes my it makes
That's
me
what I mean
so
when I say the charges
mad.
should have been dropped.
Yeah, the DA went in. I watched the district attorney's office go in to the courtroom and say, "We want to throw these charges out." When a lawyer and a district attorney agree, charges get thrown out 100% of the time. The district judge said, "No, I will not do it."
And didn't they throw charges out for other people that were arrested by that
Tons.
same officer?
Yes, lots of people. So literally, this judge is like, everyone's telling her, this woman is possessed. She's literally a woman who cannot, she is absolutely obsessed, and her legacy was being Meek Mill's judge. Now, again, the good of this will be she'll be the judge that created reform and will do a lot of good for a lot of people. So, but
Don't give her that.
I will give her that because had I not seen her,
Yeah.
and had she not done that to Meek, then we wouldn't do something good. And you know what? Sometimes it takes a bad person to create a good outcome.
And that wasn't her goal either, by the way.
No,
So,
her
right.
her goal is
Her
to
goal was not to do good.
her goal is definitely not to do good.
I got a lot of questions. Like, it's a lot of injustices that happen in this country. Like, that could have shown you systemic racism exists. Like, so why Meek's case in particular? Because I'm sure that you would see these unarmed black men and get killed at the hands of the police.
Because it wasn't. It's completely different if it's one of your closest friends. If you told me right now that your friend was sick and you need to do something, I'd send a check. Because that's what I've always done. I've been a check sender.
Well,
okay?
Since you asked, Michael.
But I got you. But all kidding aside, like when someone comes to me with a problem, it's generally like in 99% of the cases you send a check to help. It's not. I'm not. Like, I can't get involved and fight everyone's problem. When you watch one of your closest friends get royally fucked over, and he can't do anything about it, you have no choice.
But what
I
about-
would have been able to look at myself in the mirror. I don't like. There's so many other situations. You see it in the news. You're not connected to it. I say this all the time. This was a 1 in 7 billion shot because it's one of my, it was one of my. Again, if you looked at my phone log for the previous year, I probably talked to Meek, 300 days of the previous 365 days. He was always around. It's just like, I had no choice but to do what I did. It wasn't that I was any great person. It was just that the situation was so fucked up and no one else could have fixed it.
He was your friend.
What did you used to think when you would hear about those cases on the news where an unarmed black man was killed at the hands of the police? Like, what did you think, or did you think about it at all?
I didn't think about it. That's
real.
That's the honest answer. I
That's
didn't,
real.
I didn't think about it. It wasn't. I didn't think. It's just like I'm in my own world, man. I'm building a multi-billion-dollar business. Like I'm involved with the Sixers. I've got a daughter who needs me less and less in her mind these days, but needs me. So, like I'm focused on my own world. It's like you got blinders on.
And even if you think about how the
you.
media painted Meek before that, we thought, the way that they painted him, he pointed a gun at cops. He was on probation. People were saying things like, well, he should have known better to get into that fight. Well, he should have known better. People were saying those things because they really believed that this is what happened and this was a result of him pointing a gun.
Well, he should have known better, but he didn't deserve his sentence.
Well, by the way,
he should have never been on probation.
But let's keep this real. Mm-hmm. He was a 19-year-old kid that grew up in a really ruthless area.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you a question. What percentage of kids do you think in that area grow up with a gun?
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that situation. I'm talking about the popping the wheelie.
Yeah,
when you know they was on your ass like that, you should have been walking.
But he had been doing that
he
many
was
times
shooting a
before
music
and
video,
never had an
though. He was
issue.
shooting a
He didn't
video.
get caught.
Nah, I disagree. He was shooting a video.
Listen, let's just assume you're right and we're all wrong. Mm-hmm. Great. What do you do for me? You give someone, 5
years.
No, he didn't deserve that
That's
time.
wrong.
Right.
No.
Okay. Give him a traffic ticket. Give him a slap on the wrist. Give him 5 days of house arrest.
Extend his probation.
Right.
Yeah, something.
It's got to be. These things have to be appropriate.
Yes.
It was the most inappropriate thing on the planet. So I'll tell you one other story I remember vividly that we've never actually talked about before that scarred me from him. We were in Vegas together, January of the previous year, and he called me, and it was a long night out, and he was going to a club, and he called me and said, Michael, they won't let me into this club. And it was I've always liked to gamble. It was at a casino where I knew the CEO down. I'm like, what do you mean they won't let you in? He's like, they won't let me into the club. And I'm calling the CEO. The CEO's. I was mad. I called actually the number 2 person in the casino. I'm like, this is my guy. How are you not letting me? They're like, it's not me. It's the police. Then I'm like, then we're trying to talk to the police, and everyone's just pointing the finger. They were just like literally racially profiling.
Right.
I was so mad. He came back. It made me so mad. Like, how do you? It's my boy in a place where like everyone's connected me. How are you not letting this guy?
Vegas
into
is
the
very
club?
like that too.
Yeah, I mean, not for me. But
yeah, not for you, but Vegas
yeah.
definitely will. If there's anything, you've been in the rumors for anything, or you've been accused
they just
of
won't let him
something,
in.
They won't let people in.
It was.
If you're black.
I completely because he was black essentially.
You know why I respect you though? It's not the person that doesn't know who's the problem. It's the person who knows but doesn't care. So it's like now that you know, you're using your privilege to combat a lot of these prejudices you're seeing.
I'll tell you something. And again, I keep it real. There have been lots of things people try to get me involved with, and it didn't resonate with me. Mm-hmm. This is something just going through it. I would have felt like a bad human being if I didn't go out and try to really make a big difference because of what I saw. And again, you had to live through it. You had to be there. You had to be there and like live through it. Living through it was scarring. Like but by the way, the person I'm most impressed with is him.
Right.
This guy has been through every shitty situation on the planet,
right?
And he just comes out stronger and stronger. And
Is
by
that
the way,
a great album?
by the way, I'll tell you a great story about him. So I took you said how do we get him out of prison?
Right.
So one, we had investigators digging up a lot of stuff that was incredibly eye-opening. Mm-hmm. The second thing was we had a strong legal team. The third thing was I wanted to keep bringing great people to prison to visit him that could speak on the issue. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we brought Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz and Joel Embiid through to see him. James Harden went to see him. Kevin Hart went to see him. Every time someone went to see him, by the way, we have a funny Kevin Hart story we'll tell you afterward too. But every time someone went to go see him, they come out and they'd speak about the issue. Well, I took Robert Kraft there. We were on vacation, myself, Robert, and his girlfriend and mine.
Rob Kraft, let's go to jail right fast.
So Meek called. Meek would call every day, and so Meek would call, and you'd hear the crazy recording. They were calling from SCI Chester. You hear the whole prison recording. Mm-hmm. And Robert knew Meek well from me. Like we'd been on vacation together once before. They'd hung out multiple times. I said, Robert, you ought to really come see him when we land. And he said, Michael, I want to go see him. This is like he was living through the thing with me every single day because Robert, I talked to Robert 5 times a day, and I talk about the Meek thing every day because I was so obsessed with getting him out of prison. And so we landed. We went to go see him, and we're sitting in there, and I'm really just at this point letting these two guys talk because I talk to Meek all the time. I just want to them to further their relationship. And Robert looks over at Meek like an hour into the conversation. He's like, Meek, I got a question for you. He's like, last time we were together, we were on a private plane with a bunch of girls flying to Miami. You were on the top of the world. You're now sitting in an orange jumpsuit, and you're still smiling from ear to ear. I don't get it. Like he said, if it were me, I'd be so mad. How are you happy? Meek sat there. He thought about it for like a minute. He said, Robert, I've been sent to prison 3 times for never committing a crime. This is my entire life. I've been in and out of this thing my entire life. This is the first time people are fighting for me. You're here to see me today. Michael's been here 20 times. There's a crusade to free Meek. This is the first time that's happened. I did a concert without permission. I got sent to jail. I did like any little thing I did, I got sent to jail. So how could I not be happy right now? And we walked out and Rob was like, this is such an amazing guy. Like, how's this guy's attitude so good? So, for me.
This is his purpose, though. Like sometimes things happen to you so God can work through you. So
I agree 100%.
This is his purpose now.
I agree 100%. And by the way, it's funny because our relationship's changed a lot because up until he went to prison, it was all just fun. There was there was
more
nothing
shallow, superficial.
Yeah, it wasn't superficial. We were just guys being fun.
Right.
Going to games, going on trips, partying, doing fun shit. That was it. Now it's like
Bros.
It's 10% that. It's 90% like what are we doing with reform? It's changed like a more serious relationship, but it's like
It's made him a better everything though. It's made him a better man. It's made him a better artist.
And me, by the way. I mean, this guy. You asked me the question about the two Americas. We had this debate. It went on forever.
Explain
that. It started that night at the Sixers game when we were talking about. When I asked him if he wanted to go to Bugatti, he's like, Michael, there's two Americas. I would say to him, dude, shut up. Like, we live in one great country. Like, you're killing it. Stop whining. Like, you're like so many people dream of being in your situation. He's like, you don't get it. And the good thing with Meek, he's like me. He's not like, you can't really offend him. And so it's not like, we'd say dumb shit to each other and we'd be playing around. But he'd always, like, we'd have this debate and it went on forever. And we'd have this, I remember we were actually in Vegas that trip I was talking about, and one of his friends was killed, and he said to me like, "This is the two Americas I tell you about," and it was like one of the first times it started to compute, kind of compute in my brain because here we're just having fun and like, I'm getting a phone call from my daughter, he's getting a phone call that one of his friends was killed,
Right.
And but he always told me about it, and literally, so they took him to prison probably like 6:30 on a Monday night on November 6th, 2017. My phone rings an hour later. It was like from a unknown number, and I never pick my phone up if it's not in my phone. But I'm like, maybe it's because I was calling everyone in like a hysterical mode, and it's Meek. I pick up the phone. I'm like, hello. He's like, yo, Mike. I'm like, Meek. And then you hear the prison recording. He's like, I told you so. I'm like, what? He's like, I told you so. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I told you there are two Americas. It was like literally is the first thing he wanted to say to me. Literally, he's been taken to prison. The first thing he wants to do is, I told you so.
Right.
I was right, you were wrong. I later said to him, you're right. I was 100% wrong. You were 100% right.
What kind of pushback do you get because of your allegiance with Meek, but also going so hard against prison reform?
He has to leave in 5 minutes too, so just so we know.
Because prison reform is big business. So a lot of people might think you're trying to mess up their money.
Here's the thing. In the beginning, everyone was against. Everyone was against what we were. Like, I had so many people call me in the beginning and say, like, don't get involved with this. It's going to be bad for your reputation. I'm like, I don't care.
Right.
Like, literally, I didn't care. I'm running 3 private companies. No one can do anything to me. Like I can't not.
And what's bad for your reputation about fighting an unjust system?
I think
you're stepping on people. I think you're right.
People, yeah,
but you're stepping on people's money. Private prison's a big business, and you're one of those big business guys. So it's got to be calls behind the scenes like, Mike, come on.
I didn't get those calls at all.
Okay.
The calls that I did get was the people who believe the media that you talked about. Is this not a good guy? But I knew him so well. I knew he was a guy to back.
You were spreading the truth.
Right. So for me, I didn't care what anyone. I mean, people would say to me, whatever they wanted. I just said I don't care.
You're right. I know him personally, and
he's one of my closest friends. I don't care what you have to say. Like, I am not stopping until he's out of prison and she's down.
Now, what's your Kevin Hart story? You said you had a great Kevin Hart story.
Oh, well, Kevin Hart. So he comes to. So we were the Sixers in the playoffs. It's closeout night. We're playing the Miami Heat. It's Game 5 or Game 6. I can't even remember now. Kevin is in Philly. Kevin says, "Hey, I want to go see Meek." And Kevin's one of Meek's closest friends. I know Kevin through Meek. And so I take Kevin to go see Meek. And I said to Meek, like they spent a couple hours together. Actually, it was the first time I actually went through the whole prison. I'd always been in different rooms to see him. This time they're like, we want to show you the prison, and we walk around. It's like I'm just walking around in the general population of the prison, getting a hell of an education. So we're finishing up, and Kevin made some joke because Kevin's pretty good at making jokes, as we know. And Meek, and Meek says, "I'm never getting out of this place." I said, "You know, bro, maybe we get out tonight." He's like, "Michael, stop fucking saying that. I'm never getting out of here." I said, "Bro, maybe you're gonna be at our game tonight." He says, "That is never, ever, ever happening." Okay, so now it's 2:00. We leave. I go back to my office. It's now 4:00. People come running to my office. The Supreme Court just ordered his release.
Wow.
I'm like, so now it's by the way, it's their closeout game to play the Heat. It's 2 hours after I left. After he said he's never getting out of there. The Supreme Court rightfully finally orders his release, and I can't even get in touch with him because it's not like I can call him.
And be like, I told you.
Right. And so I call Kevin. Kevin's like, it was all me. I got him out. But anyway, we go and the what's become a legendary story now. I was just going to drive and go pick him up, and he'd always said to me 50 times, like, I keep having this dream that you land in the helicopter and you pick me up in prison. Like, he's this dream he always had.
Right.
And I'm like, I didn't want to, I'm just like, it's not that much further by, car. And his guy's like, you got to pick him up in the heli. You got to pick him up in the heli. So complete coincidence, my partner, the main owner of the Sixers, Josh Harris, owns the casino directly across the street. So somehow they figure it out. They make arrangements. Literally 10 minutes later, we're at the prison. And sure enough, we pick him up. And by the way, the judge was trying to not release him that night. She would not sign the paperwork because there was no bail, but they didn't put zero in the amount, so she was trying to hold him overnight.
Oh my
I'm like,
God.
He's getting out tonight. We're winning this game. So literally, we pick him up. We fly to the game. He goes in. He's literally, as everyone knows, this guy's in his prison clothes, running down into the, through the tunnel, into the locker room, high-fiving everyone. Someone comes and shaves him, brings him some clothes, and then we win the game, and we're on to the next round
What's
of the
the
playoffs.
Kev story?
The Kev story is him being in prison when Meek is saying, I'm never getting out of here. And Kevin's like, have a good attitude. But the whole thing, he was part of the whole
But then he said
conversation.
it was because of him.
But the crazy thing with Kevin was like, we were all there, and Meek is literally, I'm never getting out of here. And 2 hours later, he's getting out of there.
Now, before you leave, you got to tell us about Reform. What initiatives is Reform Alliance launching or planning to launch?
Yeah, so Reform, obviously the idea came from everything that we've talked about today, and certainly beyond over needed. We're going to focus 100% on probation and parole. And the reason is there's 6.7 million people in the criminal justice system today. 4.5 million are on probation and parole. Okay? So it's 2/3 of the system, but it's the part of the system that people really haven't focused on. And if you think about it, it's what stalked Meek's entire life.
Right.
So you go back to this 1 in 7 billion. Here's a guy who should have never been in that situation, who, to your point, I think was his purpose was probably to be in this situation.
Correct.
And so we want to really fix the probation and parole laws and rules. So we're going to go state by state and work to get laws that make sense. And look, like Jay-Z said at our press conference last week, and like I've said 100 times, and Meek said, there are a lot of people that belong in prison. But you need the crime and the time to kind of fit each other. And to me, I think of the 4.5 million people on probation and parole, I think you could cut that number in half and have communities equally safe. Right. And so we want to keep communities equally safe while dramatically reducing the people in the criminal justice population. Right. And we've set a goal, which people tell me I'm nuts, which I like when people tell me I'm nuts. We want to get 1 million people out of the criminal justice system in the next 5 years.
Yes.
So I went out and we raised $50 million to start. That's probably as big as a commitment as you could ever have. Mm-hmm. I said, hey, I'm writing a big check into this. Then Meek agreed right away. Then our next calls were to Jay-Z and Robert. The same moment we started talking about this, they said, yeah, we're in. So now you're starting with Jay-Z, Robert Kraft, Meek Mill, and Michael Rubin. So now we said, okay, who are the other people that could really help us? And, we ended up with incredible partners. We have Robert Smith, he's the richest African-American person in the world. Clara Tsai, who just bought the Brooklyn Nets. Mm-hmm. We have Dan Loeb, who's one of the most successful hedge fund managers in the world. Mike Novogratz. And Mike and Dan, what makes them really special, they've spent a lot of energy on criminal justice reform, so we want to get their expertise into this. So we've got $50 million. We hired Van Jones, our CEO. He's dedicated his life to kind of, these issues. And we couldn't be any more committed.
I would love to, you probably can't answer this question because you're not Robert Kraft, but I would love to know how Robert Kraft is pro-Trump when a lot of the policies Jeff Sessions has implemented are directly fighting against what y'all are fighting for.
Yeah, so here's what I can say to you. Where Robert and I are so similar is our diversity of friends, okay? And I can tell you right now, I'll work with anybody to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And I've done that in business. I work with a lot of people I love. By the way, I work with a lot of people I don't like in business, too. Mm-hmm. And you know what?
No permanent friends or enemies when it comes to business, baby.
And I do whatever it takes to win. And so, look, I may not always agree with Robert. Robert may not always agree with me. He and Trump may not always agree on stuff. But what I can tell you this is for this issue, for reform, it's a bipartisan issue. And I got to tell you something. Trump, and I'm not a Trump guy at all, but Trump was a huge advocate to help to get the First Step Act done, which has been the biggest step forward in criminal justice, reform history, kind of in our generation. So I got to tell you something. Robert
something good got done.
Something great got done. And I got to tell you something. I think Trump actually cares about this issue. And again, I'm not a Trump person, but I think on this issue he cares. I'm going to tell you something. Anybody we need to work with, whatever they look like, black, white, purple, blue, we're going to work with whoever we need to win with this issue.
Knicks fans too?
even Knicks fans.
Okay.
By the
I
way,
say even, man. We suck.
yeah, but
That's
I'm
easy.
not bothered by Knicks. And I think that's like, if there's something that I know about myself, it's that common sense, like kind of just will to win that I think will work. Like, so many people approach kind of an issue like what Reform's going after with a very foundation type background. I'm approaching it like a business person. There's a giant freaking problem. We got to fix it, and we're going to put aggressive business approach toward it, which is the same reason why Meek's not in prison today. Okay,
Gotcha.
And so I think I'm optimistic.
Now, how can regular people get involved? All of us.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one of the things. So I feel so. One of the things that I'm most excited about is so many people keep saying, "How can we get involved?" The first thing is to educate people. Like, the biggest thing is there's so many people that were like me. Until November 6th happened, I had no clue of this issue. I was completely clueless, and so I think being on your show talking about this today is the biggest thing. We got to tell the story about how many people are unfairly caught in the criminal justice system. By the way, we're not trying to get people out of jail that are belong in jail. We're trying to get the right people out of the criminal justice system, and there's a lot of them. There's millions of them.
Like, any type of interaction with a cop when you're on probation could land you right back in jail, even if it's not your fault.
We had a guy who literally sold drugs 9 years earlier. He literally made an illegal U-turn 9 years after he was out of prison. 9 years later, they put him in jail for 90 days for making an illegal U-turn. Wow. That judge must have been buddies with Meek's judge.
Who was the guy?
It was a guy. So as we were putting this together, we were looking for other
got you,
interesting
got you.
stories, and he came and spoke at a press conference.
We know you got to go.
We need you to keep using your privilege to combat prejudice and let other white people know that these problems really do exist. Like, black people and brown people are not making this stuff up.
And you can always use this outlet.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I didn't know a lot about the show before. Meek tells me how much he loves it. I saw you had Kevin on recently, but I got to tell you something. The biggest thing we need to do is spread the word. We got to educate people. That is the number one thing we got to do.
Now about my sick cousin.
Anyway, we appreciate you.
We got you.
Get outta here.
We got your sick
We
cousin.
appreciate you for joining us, and let you know we have this outlet anytime you need it. So we're here for you, and we're here to help people as well. So
Thank you.
we
I'm
appreciate
going
for
to tell you, we're going to come back and talk about when we've got different laws we want to get changed. We're going to come back and talk about those laws we need to get changed, because
Absolutely.
that's one of the biggest things we're going to need to do, because it's going to be state by state, law by law, convincing people to help us.
And the 76ers, good luck this season. My Knicks ain't gonna be there, so good luck to your 76ers.
Thank you.
Well, the Nets will be there, so you
There
know.
you go. You
No,
talk
it's
that
all
out.
Sixers all the time. I don't want to hear
Shout out
about these
Brooklyn
Nets.
Nets, baby.
All right. Well, it's Michael Rubin. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.